This podcast is brought to you by the Islamic Center and NYU. For more information, visit our website at www.icnyu.org.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. ونشهد أن سيدنا مولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. In the name of Allah, the gracious, the merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the universe, the Master of the Day of Judgment. I bear witness and testimony to the oneness of Allah, to His magnificence, His omnipotence, His might, His glory, to His being the creator and sustainer of all things, the giver of life, the guider of hearts, the master of the Day of Judgment. And I bear witness to the fact that Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is His servant and final messenger. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him and upon all those who choose to tread in His path until the last day. Over the last weeks, we've been looking at the final verses of Surah Al-Furqan, at a particular category of individual that Allah Azza wa Jalla describes to us, the Ibad al-Rahman. May Allah make us from amongst them. With a recognition that each and every one of us that exists in creation, whether we are aware of it or not, we can be categorically defined as an abd. By definition, you are abd when you rely on something to exist. And Allah uniquely is Rabb because He is Ghani, He is self-sufficient. The divine does not rely on anything to exist. And you can now narrow the scope of how you embrace your role as being a servant by channeling that now to reflect on what is it that I actually am in submission to. And there are so many things that consciously or unconsciously we can become subservient to. Right now, there are millions of people in these days of Dhul Hijjah who have left from their homes to perform the Hajj pilgrimage. May Allah accept from them, make it a means of benefit for them. May Allah end the injustices that come out of those cities by those who perpetrate, not in the name of our faith, but in the names of so much that is contradictory towards it. Those Hujjaj, they move forward in this mode of a recognition of embracing what it means to be a true servant of the divine. Leaving behind, not by convenience, leaving behind, not simply by choice, but seeing fundamentally that I will move forward in this journey as soon as I have the means to do so. When they make that tawaf, that you're going to see images of again and again, in your own reflection on your own role of being an abd, you want to think for yourself, what am I walking circles around day in and day out? As we stand and pray in the direction of the Kaaba, or where you are there in the Haram, in the Mataf area, and the Kaaba is right in front of you, and you see people standing at 360 degrees of perspective, directionally in a physical sense, but in a metaphysical sense, pointing not just their outward, but their inward. And you can again reflect. If I want to know what I'm an abd of, what is it that I orient my direction to? That this is a qibla of those who follow Islam. But where is my direction? What guides my compass? What am I headed towards, pointed towards? What is it that I'm truly a servant of? May Allah make us servants of Him and Him alone. Now this construct in Surah Al-Furqan qualifies the nature of these ibad by saying that they are particularly the ibad al-Rahman, the servants of the most merciful. Rahmah in and of itself is not equated to mercy. It's important to understand the nuance as we discuss another characteristic today that is relevant to the engagement and embracing of Sharia. Because when you think of mercy, when I think of mercy commonplace, we root it now in a bombardment of inequity, in oppressive systems and structures. Rooted in patriarchy, rooted in this unsatiable, overtly capitalistic greed, rooted in supremacy that claims whiteness is the primordial state. So it has us think of a sense of mercy rooted primarily in this legal system of punishments, do's and don'ts, fines, justice. Whereas rahmah is rooted in mercy definitively, but it also is rooted in compassion. It's rooted in love. It's rooted in softness, gentleness. All of these things are evoked when we talk about rahmah, not just mercy in that sense. And these ibad al-Rahman, the characteristics that we've discussed of them. Alladhina yamshuna ala al-ardi hawna, they walk on the earth with dignity and grace. And when the ignorant engage them, they respond with peace, qalu salama. They're the ones who spend a portion of the night in prostration and in standing their Lord. They're the ones that make dua to Allah, asking Him to sway them away from the punishments of Jahannam. The characteristics, the categories, they continue, they move forward. And as we mentioned last week, they're the ones who are mindful in their spending, that they do not give of their wealth in excess, israf, nor are they miserly or stingy, but they're somewhere in between. And as the verses, the descriptions, they continue, they say, وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَدْعُونَ مَعَ اللَّهِ إِلَهًا آخَرَ, that they're the ones who they do not call upon with Allah any other Lord. That they do not take the life of a nafs, وَلَا يَقْتَلُونَ نَفْسًا. They do not take the life of a nafs that Allah has made sacred. الَّتِي حَرَمَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ, except if there is a defined reason that comes from God through it, an act of self-defense or something like this. وَلَا يَزْنُونَ, they do not commit zina. And here, it creates now a distinction from the previous categories. Because those previous descriptions were giving us characteristics of the ibad al-Rahman in terms of things that they would do. And now there's a shift by saying, here's things that define them based off of what they do not do. At a face value, it can have us retreat back to a very simplistic understanding of what this religion is about. Do's and don'ts are a part of it, definitively. And the specificity of these things are important to understand because it's talking about shirk, it's talking about murder, it's talking about zina. Where our Sharia is not just a system that is in and of itself meant to pursue without it being a means to something. And you have now not just the implementation for the sake of it, but it's meant to bring you to something. There's a concept within our tradition that's called the maqasid Sharia, the objectives of Islamic law. And of them, you have the preservation of faith. You have the preservation of life. You have the preservation of honor, lineage. And these three depictions now are giving us an understanding that to be able to be one who does not engage in these things, you are achieving now the objectives of Sharia. That it's a religion, it's going to be about fundamentally the preservation of faith. And it's a very purely monotheistic religion, that you do not worship anything other than one God. And that is a God of all creation, a God that is not gendered in any capacity. Laysa kamithlihi shay means that there's not anything that's like a likeness to him. So our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who did not write any portion of this Quran, is not bringing any aspect of his culture, his gender, his class into it. But it is a God, a divine entity, that our understanding of in a limited rational capacity is that anything you can conceptualize the divine to be, know that he is other than that. A God that loves you more than a mother loves its child. A God that's not simply your God because you come from a certain background, but a God that right now, millions of people from all over the world, black, white, brown, rich, poor, young, old, have left behind everything they have to go and worship of. A gathering that's so majestic that you can see people of all backgrounds, unlike most spaces that we frequent, that have centered now God rather than centering the self, have removed distinctions that make us segmented and divided. Because the idea of Tawheed in our tradition is of one of complete unity. It will not tolerate divisiveness in any capacity. So when the Ibadah Rahman, they're not calling upon other than Allah, they're in this mode of the maqasid of the Sharia, they're preserving faith. That's what this religion is about. It's about God. It's not the preservation of any cultural practice. It's not rooted in you feeling bad because you don't want your kid to marry somebody from a different country. It's not about building gatherings that only people that come from your social class and level of wealth can participate in. It's not about the establishment of structures that seek to elevate the privileged at the expense of those that are underserved and underprivileged. But it's one that values and dignifies each and every human life, which takes to the second characteristic in this verse, that you don't murder, you don't kill. That the purpose of this religion is to preserve life. And the verses that we spit out regularly, one life saved is like all mankind, one life lost is like all mankind, these ring true. And each and every one of us, as we go into a celebration of a holiday, from an auspicious day of Arafah, that is today, may Allah accept from us on it, should be making dua if we are already not feeling it, that whenever we see acts of senseless violence, guns being shot by babies killing babies, politicians who value profits over people, making decisions and legislation that will harm the lives of millions of women, that we are not a tradition that seeks to intellectualize somebody else's struggles, especially if we're not going through those struggles in the first place. The Ibadah Rahman, they value not just their life, they value the lives of others. Your heart should hurt whenever you hear one of your black brothers and sisters have been shot in the streets. And feel even more pain when there's no accountability to their assailant. Should be in a space, this sphere that recognizes that the people who are living in this city at the highest rises and levels, their life is just as important as the person who lives on the street in the city that has no home to call their own at all. We don't make a distinction in that factor. It's not for us. وَلَا يَزْنُونَ. They don't engage in zina. The preservation of lineage, the preservation of honor, of dignity. These are verses that are revealed in a Meccan context. They're Meccan surahs. They're speaking now to a demographic directly that does not absolve us from it, because everything that's written in the Quran still bears benefit for each of its readers. Those who are hearing this now are being cultivated to a recognition. an understanding of what their theology in God needs to be. Many of us in this room learned the words haram and fard before anybody taught us who God was or how to celebrate the divine in our life. When you were sitting down and you were younger, how much of your lessons of religion were around do's and don'ts, rights and wrongs? And likely most of what you did was more haram than you did anything that was good. It creates a conceptualization subconsciously of God that he's an angry old man in the sky looking for a reason to punish you. And then we run into the challenge that when somebody wants to just get us to do what they want to do, they just attach a word of religiosity to it to make us seem as if we are somehow excluded from a relationship with the divine. The Meccans, they didn't have a belief in God the way that Islam taught one to believe in God. There was no sense of accountability or an afterlife. The recognition of a system now that was rooted in a polytheistic nature was one that still acknowledged the existence of one they called Allah. But here the Quran is saying, you don't turn to anything else. And the verses expound upon this. Do you see the one who has taken his whims, his desires as being his God? Every conflict that we see in the world today can be rooted now in this insatiable lust and desire, greed. Just as we spoke last week, people who cannot claim that what they have is enough for them. And they engage in the glorification of war, the building of a military-industrial complex that seeks to break down society upon society, not just so people can make money in breaking it down, but so they can make money so they go in and rebuild it so they can break it down again, and then rebuild it and break it down again. And they take advantage of the fact that our religious identity is not rooted in a relationship with the divine. Because how can you believe in God and not be awake to the realities in the world that exist around you? And when your religion just becomes an identity variable, Islam is something you do. It's not something you are. There's a mode of active engagement. And just like the Meccans needed to have their theology refined, they needed to be weaned towards a place you got to sit down and really think about for yourself. What do you worship, man? Is it really giving to you what it is that you think it is? Stop worshiping money. Don't get your validation from having a ring on your finger. Don't be in a place where you are seeking the approval of a creation that seeks to put you in boxes that you are most definitely bigger than. But build a relationship with Allah, who looks to accept from you rather than pushing you away, who seeks to bring you close and is there already in more proximity than your jugular vein. But you sit and you think and you reflect. Who is the God that I believe in? Do I believe in the God of Muhammad? Do I believe in the God of Ibrahim? Do I believe in the God of Hajar? Do I believe in this God that gave these people such strength that they were not finding their contentment and confidence through the acquisition of materialistic things or things that would remain in the world? But they saw the importance of the world within and connecting that to a divine entity that was the creator of all these things in the first place. They're speaking to the Meccans when they're saying that you do not kill indiscriminately. You can go to Mecca right now. If you come with us on Umrah when we go next year, inshallah, we will show you the place where young girls were buried alive for no reason other than people wanted to have sons and not daughters. And the verses are there. They're true. That girl is going to ask, what crime has she committed that her life was taken? And the hadith says that as time passes and we get towards the end of it, the person who's killing somebody isn't even going to know why they're killing the person they're killing. And the person who's being killed is also not going to know why they're being killed. Wala yaznun, the Meccans were engaged in all kinds of random relationships. It wasn't just people having multiple partners going in every direction. but to be mindful and to not be triggering for anyone in the space. The validation of incestuous relationships was there. People wanting to have nobility in their lineage, so they would have the women in their lives, their wife, to sleep with someone noble outside of the scope of the bond that they committed in matrimony, so that perhaps the child that was birthed would be birthed of that noble lineage in this stratified society that sought to push people away in the ways that we see society functioning today. And Allah's telling those people and telling us, وَلَا يَزْنُونَ, don't do this. This is not the base of dignity. The Ibad Rahman, they would take it seriously, the Sharia. Our engagement of it becomes challenging at times. That when you have a God-centric religion, it's going to assume that there's certain things that God asked you to do that you love to do, certain things that God asked you to do that are difficult, they're a struggle, and there's certain things that God asked you to do that you don't even get why you're being asked to do this. My son is 6 years old. I took him and my daughter to a soccer camp that they were part of yesterday after they went to their day camp. And he's playing with other 6-year-olds and 5-year-olds. And there's a kid that's from his public school class that's also in the camp. And at the end of it, they were passing out gummy bears to kids to eat. And my kids got a pack and then they handed it to me because there was no ingredients on it. Maybe it had gelatin, they're telling me. And so one of my son's friends, a young boy who is not Muslim, he said, Kareem, did you eat your gummies? He said, no, Jacob, I didn't eat the gummies. He said, why didn't you eat the gummies? He said, because there's gelatin in them. And then Jacob, after a couple of minutes, thought about it. And he said, what's the problem with gelatin? And then Kareem looked at him and said, I don't know. And then Jacob said to Kareem, I don't think there's gelatin in these things. And then Kareem came and pulled on me and said, Baba, Jacob said there's no gelatin in it. And I said, well, it's good that Jacob told us that there's not. And then my daughter has a friend named Charlie, and she said, I'm sorry you can't eat these, Medina, but I can eat them, so give me yours. Fundamentally, it's difficult, but a lot of what it ends up coming back to is we simply try to not do, or we strive to do, what God has asked us to do and refrain from doing. So we believe in a God that knows best. But that's a subjective understanding. You can engage it on a theoretical and an abstract. But your conviction lies within you. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have questions. It doesn't mean that you can't struggle. If you are in a place where you don't have difficulty, there's a good chance that you are now not subservient to God, but you have made a religion in which God is subservient to you. The whole point of spiritual growth necessitates that there's mountains to climb, that there's challenges that will come, obstacles in our way. It's not a religion that functions purely off of a rational or irrational frame. Something makes sense to me or something does not make sense to me, but it interjects a third prism that is supra-rational that says that I don't need to understand it in order for it to be valid. I can just be comfortable with the fact that I'm the Abd of Ar-Rahman. I don't need to be God. We have everybody just move up again, please. People are coming in. And it creates an ease that you let the divine be the divine. I wouldn't say that it's simply consequential also of an upbringing that we have where people have just given to us what it is that they possessed in the first place. The externals, the fiqh, it's important, but it's not the only thing. But you also live in a society where many of you as minorities are in a place where your identity gets stripped away. You don't get to just be. You always have to explain why it is the way that I am. It's always a struggle to be able to go into spaces and to say that I have 5 daily prayers. I need to take breaks. You likely have, in the people you are praying amongst today, individuals who have sought accommodations and they have been mocked. They have been ridiculed. People who try to make sense of the fact that my coworkers can go and smoke multiple times in a day, breaking away from work. They can go and take 2-hour lunch breaks. But if I ask for 5 minutes to just pray in a corner of a space, somehow it's the most terrible thing in the world. We're not in the middle of Arkansas. We're in liberal New York City, where you don't want to get lost in a right-left conversation because there is a deep presence on both sides of this that tells us that we are only okay when we become that which we are not. And then it's that much harder when you have an unfamiliarity of who God is to you. The people who stood and stand on the plains of Arafah today, they seek to build what we call ma'arifah with the divine. It's a knowing, but it's distinct from the types of knowings that we might think we need to know. It's not fahm, understanding, comprehension. That if I say to you, do you get that 2 + 2 = 4? You can say, yes, I understand it. It's not a ilm that if I say to you that do you know 2 + 2 = 4, you can say, yes, I know it. Do you know today is the day of Arafah? You can say, yes, I know this. But when we talk about ma'arifah, it's a type of knowing that is rooted in intimacy, acquaintanceship. It's an experiential knowledge. Just like the verse that speaks about diversity in creation. إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَىٰ وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. That you were made from a male and a female and into nations and tribes, لِتَعَارَفُوا, so that you know one another. It's an intimate knowing, not just a stereotypical knowing or a removed knowing that, yeah, I know there's some people over there that are like this. Just spend time with those that are distinct. Similarly, the Hujjaj, they stand in the plain of Arafah and they're spending time with their Creator in the hopes of building that knowing. Sharia itself is meant to be expansive, not restrictive. It's literally translated as a path to water. And you conceptualize the watering well, especially in Mecca and Arabia. Hajar, peace be upon her, who the Hujjaj celebrate in these days. We celebrate in every pilgrimage. A woman who is elderly, a woman who is the wife of Ibrahim alayhi salam, a woman who is black and is the mother of all of us. She is left with her infant child, Ismail. Nothing but some dates and water, and those then diminish to a point that they are all gone. She runs between the hills of Safa and Marwa as the pilgrims embody in their sa'i, as part of the Umrah and part of the Hajj rites, looking for some sustenance for her baby, just as any mother would. Where Ismail is kicking at the dirt, the sands with his blessed feet, the angel comes and strikes and the wells of Zamzam spring forward. And as the water now starts to move away, surfacing, birds start to flock into the middle of the desert. A tribe called the Jurham tribe, they see these animals going to where they know there is nothing. And so they send some emissaries to inquire what is taking place. And to their astonishment, they find this large body of water, this elderly woman with her baby, her child. They say, as a tribe, can we settle here? And she says, yes, but the water is under my ownership. The Jurham settle, the people start to come, and becomes the foundation of the city of Mecca. But the water is attracting life to it. The Sharia as a path to water is meant to be invigorating. It's not meant to be deflated. It's meant to be something that creates replenishment when you are parched. It's meant to be something that's rejuvenating and empowering. It's hard to do that when religion is not rooted in its fundamental objective, which is about connecting you to God. You don't come to pray here today because your mom and dad would get upset with you if you didn't. You don't fast just because everybody else is fasting. It can be your entry point. You do these things because Allah in His infinite wisdom, Ar-Rahman in His mercy, has given it to us as a means for us to be able to stay balanced, to have contentment in a world that is otherwise chaotic. I had a conversation with who said to me that for some time I left this religion of Islam because the upbringing that I had was one that was so confining, validating abuse, validating mistreatment, validating hardships of all kinds. And she said, when I got older and I started to meet Muslims from different places, I realized that the Islam that they had wasn't the Islam that I was brought up with. And now I'm in a place where I've looked at other religions, but it doesn't necessarily resonate. The theology does not make sense. What Islam says theologically makes sense. I'm trying to now unlearn what I learned so I can learn now with more of an open mind. I'm sorry if people use religion to hold you down. And I'm sorry if people made religion about anything other than God for you. There are millions of people who right now have left their home in pursuit of a relationship with the divine, of all backgrounds. Just reflect. What are they doing? The Ibad ar-Rahman that are in these verses, they take Sharia seriously, not as a joke, but as a philosophy on life that creates an ethical framework through which they make decisions and choices, do's and don'ts. In the coming verses, we're going to see that Allah continues to discuss and talk that those who engage in these acts, there's opportunity for them to have punishment, but there's also opportunity for them to return to the divine in such a way that when they do this, whatever they did that was not good gets now transformed in their favor as hasanats. This is not meant to be a transactional relationship with the divine, but to understand yet again, Allah is looking for any reason to be able to accept from us. The only thing that's getting away.
If you would like to listen to more, please donate to www.icnyu.org/donate. For more of our virtual programs, go to www.icnyu.org/classes. If you have any questions, email us at info@icnyu.org.
And for what reason? Another thing that you would want to read, and if we had more time, and perhaps later today when we gather before Iftar, for those who are going to join us here to break fast on this day of Arafah, you go back and read the farewell khutbah of the Prophet ﷺ that was delivered on the day of Friday in that year on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, also the day of Arafah, where he talks about so many different important things. Do you want to just think about, at this phase of my existence, how is it not now an identity variable, but something that I believe in with conviction, and I believe in also what it's teaching me, will offer to me through its implementation, the abandonment of which is not going to rear me anything other than more of the agitation that I'm feeling inwardly. Allah is here with us, closer to us than our jugular vein. The day of Arafah is arguably the most auspicious day on our calendar. You want to carve out for yourself an opportunity to take blessing and barakah, the advantage of it, because of so many good people who right now are interjecting gain that you can yield for your benefit. So reflect with openness, make dua with confidence. Set aside some time before the time of Maghrib comes in. It's a day that you connect to Allah. And in these verses, the Ibad al-Rahman, they're those who do not call upon anyone other than Allah. They're those who, they're not engaged in the indiscriminate murders, the support of any of these things that create the systemic oppressions that yield to murders of so many. They find dignity in the preservation of family and lineage, وَلَا يَزْنُونَ. And they know that there's opportunity, that even when you slip, you can come back, as the verse continues, and we'll go into that more detail in the coming weeks. But there's a purpose even to falling. It's not to stay down, but the reason that we fall is so that we know how to get back up. The Ibad al-Rahman, they understand that mistakes will be made, transgressions will happen, but you can still always come back to the divine. He's not the one that's moving. You just got to get yourself to a place where you can recognize it and do what's best for your heart and not its expense. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله تعالى فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا مولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. Tonight, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to be hosting iftar here at the center, open to everyone. Feel free to join us. Prior to Dr. Marwa, Sheikh Fayaz, and myself, be sharing some reflections starting at 7 o'clock. We'll make dua before Maghrib. If you want to join us in this space leading into it, we can benefit from the presence that you will bring individually. Please do join us. We're going to be hosting Eid prayers tomorrow in accordance with the Sunni tradition. We're hoping, inshallah, it's going to be in Washington Square Park. If the rain does not hold off, then we'll move inside to the 10th floor of the building next door. And either way, we'll be providing a brunch to the community in the building next door after Eid prayers are done. And on Sunday, we'll be hosting Eid prayers in accordance with the Shi'i tradition. And that'll be happening in the 4th floor prayer room here. Both will start at 8:30. We're going to open doors at 8 a.m. So please do join us. If you're not able to join us for these gatherings, again, make use of this day of Arafah. And it's not to think about this in a morbid way, but to think about it in a way that recognizes it as a blessing. Because there's a lot of people who they would have done anything to have made it to Hajj this year. There's a lot of people who would have done anything to be able to witness the day of Arafah, to be able to stand, make dua, whether they're on the plain of Arafah or they're here in New York City or any part of the world. And they're not written amongst those who are going to be able to witness it on this day. May Allah grant them peace. But you're here. This is your day to take advantage of. Yes, you'll have to go back to work. Yes, you might have to go back to class. Yes, there might be some things that you have to do. But you can carve out some moments to just turn yourself towards your Lord and seek to take advantage of something that so many others are going to be taking advantage of. Why would you deprive yourself of it? When the holiday dawns upon us, be sure to celebrate the holiday. There's some of us who don't have choices because of life circumstances. We have to go to places of work. we have to go and do certain things. I've been working on Eid for the last 20 years of my life. But to understand that there's also those of us who will simply choose to not celebrate. That can't be a choice. You're not going to feel the blessings and the benefits of the Sharia if you turn it into a dismal place to begin with. Invite people to spend time with you. Turn to the people you're going to be praying with today and say, what are your plans for this weekend? Allow for yourself to engage in the blessings of a communal experience, but make opportunity as well for those who might not have anybody else to celebrate with. You're going to come to Eid here tomorrow, go to a local grocery store, buy a box of candy, and just start passing it out to kids. Be in a place where you can anticipate how you bring joy to somebody. Doesn't even have to be Muslim people. Allow for yourself to celebrate in every sense of the word with creativity. Tell the people you love that you love them. If it's the first time you're going to give somebody a mechanical hug, then make sure that it's the first of many times and you don't wait for 2 holidays on a calendar year. But you allow for yourself to anticipate, what will this day look like for me? If you have not done so already, you want to perform the udhiyah, the qurbani, the ritual slaughter that's attached to the days of Eid. Within the Abrahamic tradition, we likely know the story. There's a lot of people in the world right now who will benefit quite deeply from being able to have food to eat through the performance of this udhiyah. Our center is sending contributions to Sudan, where right now more than 9.6 million people face food insecurity, hunger, starvation. May Allah make things easy for them. There's no shortage of places in the world right now where people don't have anything. You and I literally will be able to eat when the sun goes down, or go eat now, or drink water at the fountain behind this wall that will give you cold, refreshing water at your leisure. That's not to create guilt. It's just to think about. Again, you don't want to perform mindlessly. These verses that we just looked at, as you go toward the end of time, the performance of shirk, the performance of murder, the performance of zina, they're going to become mindless acts. People are just going to engage in them without any elements of consciousness present. So you see this as a spiritual vehicle. You give your udhiyah because somebody else is going to be able to benefit through it. And when they receive it, they're going to not just receive food to eat or food to give to their children that they otherwise not would have had, but they'll feel as if they're not forgotten. They'll know that somebody is remembering them. And lastly, we are partnering on a campaign as well to bring Eid toys, gifts to children who are in pediatric care in hospitals right now. I last night did a Zoom with a family whose 4-year-old son fell out of a 2nd-story window and is in a medically induced coma right now in the hospital. Their family zoomed in from all over the world. We read Quran, we made dua for the well-being of our baby brother. There's families and children that are like that. And when we do these things, it's not so we can say, look at what we've done, but we're trying to recognize the lived realities of so many who Eid is still for them. So all you got to do is push a button. That's really what it comes down to. You remember we talked about last week, spending has become such a mindless action also, but now you can bring consciousness to it, to your ease, that in a blink of an eye, you're able to bring happiness to a child and to a family who otherwise would be sitting by themselves in a hospital, not knowing what to do on this day of Eid. So be mindful of the social aspects of these holidays, the social equity aspects, the communal aspects. Be ready to celebrate. It's a holiday that Allah has given to us for our benefit.
If you would like to listen to more, please donate to www.icnyu.org/donate. For more of our virtual programs, go to www.icnyu.org/classes. If you have any questions, email us at info@icnyu.org.